Welcome to the Historical Romance Sampler Podcast, the place for you to find new historical romance books and authors to fan over. I'm award-winning historical romance author Katherine Grant, and each week I'm inviting fellow authors to come on and share a little bit of their work and themselves. They'll read a sample of one of their books, and then I'm going to ask them a bunch of questions. By the end of the episode, you'll have a sense of what they write and who they are. Hopefully, you and I both will have something new to read. So what are we waiting for? Let's get into this week's episode. So today I'm joined by Andie James. Andie has been a voracious reader her entire life, and during the COVID pandemic, like many of us, she couldn't bring herself to read anything heavy, so she turned to that happily ever after in romance. After a 15-year career in student and academic development in higher education, she took a leap of faith and decided to try her hand at writing. Andie decided to start with a focus on historical romance, as she loves the fantasy inherent to the genre and the way a historical lens can provide a different perspective to understand contemporary issues. Andie happily lives in Tacoma, Washington with her cat. She loves living in the Pacific Northwest and feels invigorated by the beauty of the Puget Sound. And Andie tries to live by the philosophy of Ted Lasso and looks at life with a realistic optimism. Welcome, Andie.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you. So I know you're reading today from the book that is coming out March 22nd, Bequeathed,
Yes.
The Beaumonts, book one.
Yes.
Can you set up what we can expect to hear from the book and also the scene?
Yeah. So this is the first book in a new series following the Beaumont family. So this book centers on West Beaumont, who is the eldest son and has just inherited the title. He is the Marquess of Hampton. And also Lady Priscilla is our heroine, and she made an appearance in my first series as a side character. So now she's getting her own moment. And
Nice.
She is a very young widow. She's 23, but she is a dowager duchess now. And so she's kind of re-entering society after her mourning for the first time and is really looking to kind of start over. Like her family had, very high aspirations for her. She's the daughter of a marquess herself, and they wanted her to make this great match, and she did. She's now a dowager duchess, but she's looking to spread her wings. And West, our hero, is very much wanting to change the way his family has operated. And so he's also looking to kind of get away from some of the expectations that were previously placed on him. So they're both kind of in this place. The scene I'm reading is going to be chapter 8 in the book. And so one piece of context I think would be helpful before we begin is that one of Priscilla's kind of character quirks, I guess, is that when she hears music, it's very emotional for her. So when she hears kind of like an orchestra tuning up or something like that, she kind of gets this wave of emotion and she tears up, and it's embarrassing to her. So
Okay.
that's just a piece of context there. Another evening, another ball. It was still the first week of the season, and Priscilla was already more than eager for it to be over. The only reason she had even attended tonight's soiree was that she was still seeking out candidates for the affair that she desired. It was too bad the only man she felt drawn to was the one she refused to consider. But she had genuinely enjoyed her conversation with Lord Hampton the other evening, feeling that in a way she had found a kindred spirit, and she found herself recalling the ease she felt around him often in the last few days. Looking around her, the ballroom was beginning to fill as more and more members of the ton made their way through the receiving line. Across the room, Priscilla spotted her cousin Alice, who was in her debut season. Surrounded by other young ladies, Alice was tittering behind her fan. If the glances towards another young lady standing nearby were any indication, it was most likely at that poor girl's expense. It was like looking into a mirror at herself 4 to 5 years ago. A shiver went down her spine, but she was not surprised. Alice had been raised in the same manner as Priscilla, taught to view herself as elite and above most of the others around her. And as the daughter of a second son, she knew her uncle was pressuring Alice to make a good match and help the family financially so that they would not be so dependent upon her own father. Frowning, she took a step forward to speak with her cousin and almost ran into Lord Hampton himself. Lady Priscilla, he said with a slight bow of the head, we seem to keep running into one another. Yes, almost literally this time, she quipped. Do excuse me. No excuses needed. I should have been watching where I was going. But it is remarkable that we keep finding one another after not having truly known one another before, he said thoughtfully. I hope that's not a bad thing, she teased. Most people tend to find me charming now that I've reformed my competitive ways and biting tongue. His lips twitched as if he were trying to suppress a smile, and Priscilla couldn't help thinking again how much she liked the small crinkles that appeared around his eyes when he was amused. Not at all, he replied, but we should move out of the way unless we intend to partner for the first dance. It looks like the band is about to start playing. Looking up at the musicians in alarm, she realized Hampton was correct as she observed one of the violinists place his instrument beneath his chin and raise his bow. Oh, if you'll excuse me. Alice now completely forgotten, she turned away abruptly. Though Priscilla knew she was being rude, she quickly made her way to the adjoining drawing room so that her eyes would not betray her, creating the need for an explanation should she tear up in front of the Marquess. A mere minute later, when the music began, she did indeed begin to well up and took a moment in the empty room to compose herself. Unfortunately, just as she was preparing to rejoin the other guests, Lord Warrington stepped into the room. Oh, Your Grace, I was just looking for you. How about that dance that was mentioned we should have when we were at the Westons? Merd. She had really been hoping he either wouldn't remember his threat to dance with her or would fail to attend tonight's soiree for some reason. Think. How was she going to potentially find a way out? The last thing she wanted to do was dance with the man, and she certainly did not wish to encourage his pursuit. Out of the corner of her eye, Priscilla saw Hampton walk past the thankfully still open door. My Lord Hampton, she called out, waiting for an agonizingly long second, desperate to see if he had heard her and would return at her call. When he stepped back into view and gave a quizzical lift of the brow he was always smoothing, she almost collapsed in relief and spoke before fully thinking. There you are, she said much too brightly. I was about to look for you. Are you ready for our dance now? He looked confused, but blessedly took a further step into the room. You're already engaged to dance? Warrington asked, brow creased in frustration. Yes, I'm so sorry. I'm afraid you're too late to claim this one. I've already promised myself to the Marquess. I do hope you understand. Warrington made a grab for her dance card, and Priscilla had a brief moment of panic as she knew the line for this dance remained empty. Your dance card says otherwise, the Baron said curtly. My fault, came Hampton's voice. Stepping up beside Priscilla, he gave Warrington a placating smile, and she immediately relaxed, knowing he had caught on to the situation and was playing along. We made a verbal agreement when I first saw her Grace this evening, and she had yet to pick up her dance card. You did ask me to pencil you in once I had it, but silly me forgot, Priscilla added, looking up at Hampton gratefully. I suppose it was an honest mistake, Warrington said grumpily. Turning towards Hampton, he added, Didn't mean to step on any toes, my lord. Hampton bowed his head in acknowledgement, and the other man left the room. Oh, thank you, Priscilla said, wilting into a slump next to her savior. She reached out and impulsively placed a hand on his arm, feeling its warmth even through her gloves and his sleeve. Truly, I can't thank you enough. He placed his own hand atop of hers, looking at her intently, and her breath stuttered. The only thing that saved her from making a fool of herself was catching movement out of the corner of her eye. Turning to look, she saw Lord Percy approaching. He, too, had insinuated earlier in the evening that he would be seeking her out again later. Oh, dear God, not another one. Hampton looked up at her exclamation and examined the man making his way towards them. Another of your many admirers, he drawled. Quick, help me, she said, beginning to panic. Then Priscilla acted without thinking once again, which seemed to be a pattern that evening. Surging on to her toes, she grabbed the back of Hampton's neck before drawing him down into a kiss. All thoughts, including the impending encounter with Lord Percy, fled from her mind. The only thing Priscilla was capable of focusing on was the soft press of his lips against her own. It was as if everything in the room around her faded, and she knew instantly that she was in trouble. West was lost. Nothing in the world existed other than the feel of her soft lips and the press of her body against his. When she pulled back a mere centimeter and looked at him with shock-widened eyes, he fell helplessly into their depths. Scylla, he whispered. He was still somewhat dumbfounded when Lord Percy's bumbling intruded upon the moment, snapping them both back to attention. Lady Priscilla jumped back as if his arm, which had come around her back at some point, had scalded her. I'm so sorry, Your Grace, Percy said, stumbling backwards, clearly shocked to have come upon her in an embrace. I did not realize you were seeing anyone. I will leave you with your sweetheart. The man quickly departed, still looking a bit dazed. Oh dear, she said in a small voice, lifting a hand to press her fingers against her lips. I'm afraid I acted without thinking. I only meant to deter him, but now he believes you are courting me. So let him think it, West managed to say after his breathing returned to normal. He could still feel the ghost of her lips and was loath to use his own should it quicken the fate of the sensation. But more than anything, he wanted to reassure her. He should leave you alone for a while now. No harm in that. Yes, but she was clearly still distressed, so he reached out to place a hand on her arm and ground her. The touch was electric and had the opposite of his intended effect. Her eyes jumped up to his, and she pulled her lower lip between her teeth, causing his gaze to focus there. Oh, what a mess I've made, she cried, turning away from him. Yes, I did want him to leave me alone. I want them all to leave me alone, but I didn't mean to implicate you. I acted without thinking and now will cause a scandal for being so brazen in public. She quickly turned back his direction, and he could see how agonized she truly felt by the furrow of her brow. And if people believe you are pursuing me, you'll not be free yourself to pursue another. Now that was a thought. West shook his head, pulling himself fully back into focus so he could see the beginnings of an idea through. What if they did believe that? He said slowly, speaking his thoughts aloud. What if we continue to let everyone think we are seriously considering one another? Surely the word is already spreading. You know as well as I do how quickly gossip moves at a ball. It would already be difficult to counter, so let's not even try. Lady Priscilla looked puzzled. But you don't wish to be with me. We both established the other evening that we are the last people the other wishes to consider, as it would please our families too much. Exactly, was said, fully seeing how it could work. It would please our families. If our mothers believe we are pursuing a relationship, they will leave both of us alone. No more pestering. And then the men who are after you only for your status and wealth will be deterred. Understanding was beginning to settle in, and the distressed look was leaving Lady Priscilla at last. I'd have freedom from worry of compromise or pursuit of gentlemen I don't desire, she said with a gleam in her eye. Exactly. Let's simply pretend to be in a relationship so we can have some space to breathe and no need to deal with others' expectations. The more Wes thought about this idea, the more he liked it. His mother would stop suggesting he find a wife now that he held the title, and he would not need to be on his guard around those who might be looking to land him. It was true he had less to recommend him than Priscilla did, but as she had said to him at the Westons, he was an eligible Marquess. Now he just needed to convince Lady Priscilla of the plan, but she was starting to look worried again. I'm not sure we'll be able to pull it off. It means we would have to attend several Tawn events together and be seen out and about in society. Better and better. The thought of being around her as his body was still awakened by her kiss sounded like an appealing prospect. I think it could work, but I understand if you want to think it over, he told her. Why don't we meet in Hyde Park tomorrow afternoon, and we can discuss it on a walk? We should be able to talk things over a bit more freely there than in a crowded ballroom. You're right, she said. I'll meet you at 4 in the afternoon tomorrow, and we can decide how to proceed then.
Ooh, how exciting.
Yes.
Setting up a fake relationship, one of the
Yes.
best tropes out there. There was a lot sparkling on that page. Thank you for reading it. I have a lot of questions for you, but first we're gonna take a quick break for our sponsors. samplers, it's Katherine Grant. I am interrupting this episode to tell you how to get a free book, The Viscount Without Virtue. First, go to bit.ly/HRSFAN. Go through the checkout process. This is where you add the promo code HRSFAN. As your last step, just download your free ebook to your e-reader. All right, well, let's get back to this week's episode. So we're back with Andie James, who just read a sample from Bequeathed, the Beaumonts book 1, which comes out March 22nd. And there was a lot that was set up in that scene besides the fake relationship trope, which sounds like it's going to be yummy and delightful. I was picking up on some power imbalances with Lady Priscilla being aware of her social status, but then also feeling at the mercy of the gentlemen who were coming to her. Yes. This sense of alliances, and she was forging one with West, but kind of without asking his permission first. And then there's this whole idea of family, revenge, and kind of how that upsets the apple cart. So I'm curious, I feel like those are all kind of themes that go back to what you mentioned in your bio, which is that you like how historical lens can help explore contemporary issues. So my question is, how do you think about this historical lens? And is it through tropes? Is it through plot devices? What's your entree?
I think for me, it's not as specific as that. I think it comes out as I'm writing, in that I'm always trying to find ways for my heroines to really feel empowered, and really trying to note the social restrictions that they had at the time, the fact that they just didn't really have any rights. They, were kind of like they belonged to their father, and then when they got married, they belonged to their husband, and there was very little that was their own. So like in this book, I'm really exploring the fact that Priscilla's very excited by her status as a widow. Because it allows her some freedoms that she never had before, because it's this weird in-between space. And she's still a woman. She still very much does not have, any kind of level of power or anything, but she no longer has to have like a chaperone in public, because her innocence doesn't need to be protected anymore now that she's been married and she understands, and so I think she's, I'm trying to explore like, what would it have been like to exist in that space? And, I'm not necessarily trying to comment overtly on her own time, but I think I know when I read books, like I'm always making connections where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, women still, are restrained in certain ways. And I think just trying to subtly make those connections and try to find new ways to look at that. I also comment, it doesn't come out at all in what I just read, but I very much am commenting on slavery in this book. Other books I have, had homosexual characters, and I plan to continue, and some books to come in the series. And so I think I'm just trying to say, even though this may not be the history we've ever been presented with in the books, like these kind of battles within people have always existed. We've always had people who've been attracted to people of the same sex. We've always had inequalities. So I think it's just a different way for us to think about what's going on in our own society and see, oh, it was like a hot mess back then, but it's still kind of a hot mess now.
Yes. Yeah. No, I often say that I feel the Regency and current contemporary America have certain resonances, because the Regency for Britain was a time of great wealth for some people and great poverty for others. And the penal codes were kind of going through transition. So there was a lot of like over incarceration, but not just incarceration, like transportation, and people could get hanged for crazy things.
Yeah.
And then there were all these lack of rights, like you said. And so for me, when I'm reading books, I tend to see, well, how did that character interact with this system that they're in?
Yeah.
And then it kind of helps me as an individual think, am I interacting with systems? So I like the way that you were thinking about it. One of the challenges I think about, and I'm so curious how you approach it, is ultimately historical romance is an optimistic genre with happily ever
Yes.
afters, and
Yes. Mhm.
we want something that's not too heavy.
Right.
so
Right.
so how do you think about balancing this realism and exploring issues with a capital I versus delivering that optimistic read?
Oh, gosh, that's hard. I think through presenting the hope in the relationship, maybe the romance and the things we love are that can make it there's a happy part in all of this. That's why I love romance, right? That's why I read it. I don't care if you take me on an angsty ride because I know it's still going to be a happy ending.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I never want my books to be crazy heavy, but I'm also a realistic writer. Like I'm not the person who's going to write the fun, witty rom-com. I can't. Like that's just
Yeah.
not my style. I love them. I read them all the time, but I can't write them, you know? And so it's that balance. And I think, I've struggled with that in all my books because I don't want to write tragedy porn. I don't want to just like pour on, you know, I don't want to create conflict for the sake of creating conflict, but this is also the reality of situations then. And so I don't know. I don't think I answered how do I find a balance? I don't. It's hard. It's hard
Yeah.
because I want it to be realistic, but I guess I always try to find the hope in it and try to find like a supportive character or something that is a realistic resolution as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Courtney Milan talks about, she wrote Suffragette Scandal, which is about a suffragette, but it
Mhm.
took place decades before women got the vote. And
Yeah.
so she talks about how she had to find a storyline there that is an optimistic ending when this character might not live to see women get the vote,
Right. Right.
which is similar like when we're dealing with women's rights and also when we're thinking about slavery in the Regency period. The slave
Yeah.
trade was abolished in 1807, but slavery
Right.
in England and Britain was not outlawed until 1833, and then we know in America it wasn't until
Yeah.
1865.
Which directly plays into this book. So I mean, obviously nothing I read indicates that, but yeah. So
Yeah, that's so interesting. I had another question that was, oh, okay. You mentioned in your bio that you came to romance in the COVID pandemic times, and
yeah.
I also similarly consider myself a late in life romance reader because I
Yeah.
didn't start when I was 12. I started when I was
Right.
in my 20s.
Right.
So I'm curious, first of all, what stopped you from reading romance before then?
Well, I wouldn't it's not like I'd never read romance before. I should qualify that. I had read romance since I was a teenager, but it wasn't like the thing I always read. It was like a book here and there. When I was younger, I pretty much only read historical, like not I love contemporary, I read contemporary all the time now, but at that time it was historical. And I think growing up as we do in our society and the things that we're told and the taboo around it, it just felt kind of taboo. And so it was
Mhm.
fun to read it because it felt taboo, but I also didn't read it all the time because it was taboo in a way. I don't think that way at all anymore, but
Yeah.
when you're a teenager, that's how you feel. And so I'd read it here and there. I mean, I've been a huge reader. I love to read. I huge reader my whole life. And I loved historical fiction in general. I read a lot of that, but I don't know, and then there'd just be like, in my 20s, every once in a while I'd be like, God, I just need a romance. And I'd read them here and there, but it wasn't all the time. It wasn't the main thing I read. And then the pandemic was like, I had a bunch of stuff on my TBR and a bunch of books, and they just kind of, were like literary fiction and not always dealing with light, happy things. And I was like,
Yeah.
I just cannot handle this right now. Like, we got heavy stuff going on politically. We're like stuck in our homes. We've got like I just was like, I can't do that. And I just was craving something light and happy. And I just dove into romance. And so that was the point when it became the main thing I read.
Mhm.
And I just kind of like truly fell in love with the genre, I think, and saw a lot more sides of it. It's such a big, expansive genre. And so I read a lot of, different pieces of it. And it just became the only thing I wanted to read because it does so much, but I also, again, knew there would be that happy ending. So even if it was a hard ride along the way to get there, I still would be happy. And it just became the thing that was keeping me, like really keeping me sane during that time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there are any things, any specific facets or layers of romance that you uncovered that maybe like were breaking assumptions that you had about the genre once you really started diving into it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for sure. I think the genre has evolved a lot,
Yeah.
obviously, over time. And so some of the books I read when I was younger, might have been some of the ones more from like the 90s where it wasn't like totally problematic, but it also maybe wasn't the same kind of empowerment I think a lot of people try to right now.
Hmm.
And so I think, I don't know, I just saw how much depth there was to a lot of these stories, how well written so many of them were, which I think, is kind of a thing that people are like, oh, these books are terrible and whatever.
Yeah.
But I just got so much joy out of them.
Hmm.
And so I was like, that's what's important, right? Like we really want to enjoy this, but I saw so many things like social commentary in books and just the insight into our really the human condition. I mean, these books are about characters more than anything, right?
Hmm.
Um, and it's exploring what makes us tick, how do we feel, how do we all of those things. And so I just really appreciated it in this whole new way.
Yeah. I think for me, really compelling romance is very character focused and
Yeah.
very emotion. It's
Yes.
diving into why do we have these emotions and making
Mhm.
space for big emotions.
Yes.
Whereas literary fiction, for example, tends to be like it's focusing on small emotions and then not really like it's like, oh, there's an emotion there, but we're not going to explore it. We're just going to have it
Yeah.
do something really weird to the character.
One of the things I love in a book is when I can read about someone who is so different from myself. And I think this is the power of literature in general. But like, I maybe in their situation would never react the way they do, but I can totally understand why they do. So if a book is
Mm,
well written and I can understand those motivations and I can kind of live, through that person's perspective, like maybe I'm like, oh God, I would never, but I get your reaction. I understand why you did that. And that's why I'm a firm believer in that reading in general makes us more empathetic because
hmm.
we can kind of see and understand and think of things through different people's perspectives. But
Absolutely. I think there are studies that back that up. All right, let's see. I think it's time to move into Are You a Romantic?
Are you a romantic?
Which do you trust more, your heart, your gut, or your brain?
ultimately, it's my gut, but I want to say an informed gut. I'm gonna get this quote totally wrong, but you did read my bio where I mentioned Ted Lasso, but there's a quote that Ted says in there somewhere where he's talking to Rebecca and he says something about, listen to your gut, but on the way down, check in with your heart. And between those two, it'll tell you what you need. I would add start at your brain. I'm very much I'm really going to consider it. I'm going to logically think through. I'm going to check in how I'm feeling about it. And then based on those two things, I'm going to totally just trust what my gut's telling me based on that. So
Mm.
it is the gut, but it doesn't work alone.
It's got a big microbiome going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Do you believe in love at first sight?
You know, I don't. I believe we can think that it's love at first sight. I 100% believe in attraction at first sight, maybe even lust at first sight. But I think for there to really be love, you have to actually have some even minimal understanding of that person. So I think there has to be at least a conversation. I think it could easily quickly go there. And so maybe in hindsight, we look back and we think that was love at first sight, but I don't actually think it is because I think there has to be a deeper level there. But that's just
Okay.
me.
So it sounds like you believe there is a difference between lust and love.
I do very much so. I think let's just the physical, like, whoo, I'm attracted to you, like something's going on here. But I think love has the deeper connection and the emotional component to it.
Do you believe in soulmates?
I do, but I don't necessarily believe that there's just one.
Okay.
I think many people we could connect with. I think you could have a friend that's a soulmate. I think you could have, yeah.
Okay. Do you believe in true love?
I do. I think that it can grow. I mean, that maybe that's counter to everything I just said, but I think there can be something really deep and beautiful that grows between two people.
Mm.
Yeah.
And do you believe true love and soulmates are different?
I do, because like I said, I think a friend could be a soulmate. I think true love has like a romantic component that a friendship maybe doesn't.
All right. And finally, why is romantic love important?
I think it's a different type of love. I think familial love is super important, and not everyone has that. It's just naturally, but I think there's something that comes from having a connection to someone in the way that you do in a family that I don't want to say makes it mandatory or obligatory. That sounds terrible, but like you almost kind of like feel like you must love this person.
Mm.
Um, and so there's something special in like friendship and romantic love where those people aren't necessarily connected to you in any way. And so they're choosing you, which is very special. But then, even different from friendship, in romantic love, there's that desire and that attraction. And so I think that makes it unique. So it's like that I'm choosing you. I don't have to be around you, but there's also this extra layer of like, pull to this person that you might not feel with a friend. So I think
Mm.
it's this unique thing. And
Yeah.
that's special. We all need to feel that way in our life and feel that someone sees us that way.
All right. Well, Andie, I'm going to call you, and I don't think this is going to shock you, a realistic romantic.
Oh, well, see, there you go. Yeah, I think I like that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Where can our listeners slash viewers find you and your books?
Yeah, so my books are all on Amazon and they're also in Kindle Unlimited, so you can read them there. My first series of 3 books is all available there right now. And then Bequeathed, which we read from today, you can pre-order right now on Amazon and it will come out March 22nd. And as far as like me and social media, I'm mainly on Instagram. That's the best place to find me. I'm on some other things, but really just follow me on Instagram. And my handle is at Andie James Author.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much.
That's it for this week. Check out the show notes where I put links for my guests, myself, and the podcast. Until next week, happy reading.